going to get a second chance in the game.
All right, hello coaches. I'm Chris Wolfe, Louisville Male High School. I'm going to talk to you today about our 4-2-5 defense. I am going to give 3 clinics, and they build on one another. The first clinic is more of our communication. About 6 years ago, we were able to coordinate a communication system which allowed us in our 4-2-5 to make defensive adjustments to different surface areas. So we ended up creating a communication system that works for 90% of what you're going to see. We refer to these formations a lot of times as surfaces. So the first clinic that I'm going to talk about is going to be offensive formation recognition and surface adjustments. This is something that we've been doing for the last 5 years, and it's really been helpful for us in a base nickel defense to be able to stop a lot of the different offensive configurations and to make quick adjustments. Now the first video is going to be just our structure and our communication. The second video is going to piggyback on that, and we're going to get into kind of the guts of the defense. The nickel defense for us, it's all about being able to get secondary run support and be able to stop the run from a base nickel, and that was something that we've been very good at the last 4 or 5 years, and I want to talk about some of the key things in doing that. That'll be in Clinic 2. Clinic 2 will have some video to go with that and show you some of the structures that we faced and how we're able to adjust to those structures on the fly. And then Clinic number 3, if you're a base nickel defense, most people talk about how difficult it is to stop the run, or there's concerns about stopping the run. Well, we haven't had that issue in stopping the run in a base nickel versus a 1-back or 2-back. But if you're going to base in nickel, we have found that you need a sub package for a 3-back. And so my third clinic, we're going to get into our short yardage sub package. We call it Wolverine. I'll have some video clips to show you how effective that has been for us, not only just in a goal line situation, but if you face a base 3-back team, we've used it out in the middle of the field also, and it's been very effective for us. So let's get started. Let's talk about the first clinic here. We're going to talk about our formation recognition and our surface adjustments that we use in our base nickel defense. First, talk about our defensive effectiveness. The last 4 years have been great years for us. We've had some talented teams. But one thing that's been consistent for us is our scoring defense. We've been the top 2 in the state in scoring defense at the 6A level, which is the highest level in Kentucky. You can see in 2014, we were 13 points per game. That was good enough for number 2 in the state. 2015 was a landmark year for us. We had everything kind of come together. We had an amazing class, a tight-knit class, and that group finished with just giving up 6.2 points per game over 15 games. That class ended up being ranked nationally by several publications in the top 10 and others in the top 20. The only team we've had to be ranked nationally in the top 10 in the school's history since the rankings started in 2000. And in the last 2 years with 2 young teams, we were able to also remain highly ranked. In 16, we were number 2 in the state in 6A, and also last season, we were also number 2 in the state in 6A. So we're real proud of the consistency that we've had in our defense over the years. And this is with different groups of guys. So we feel like there is some schemes that are playing a role in us, and we're getting better as coaches in being able to teach a base nickel defense from year to year and being able to stop the run. And of course, if you're in a base nickel, you should be fairly good against the pass, and we've had a lot of success against the pass also. So I want to talk about our defensive philosophy. One of the things that we do defensively is we're based out of a 3-and-out defense. We really judge our defense on how many times we can get 3-and-outs. And here's the philosophy behind that. If you're a turnover defense, that's fine too. But what we found is if you overemphasize creating turnovers, a lot of times your tackling fundamentals are pretty poor. And so guys end up doing more about ripping the ball out than they are securing the tackle. So while every defense wants to have turnovers or create takeaways, if you will. We feel like if we think about ourselves as a 3-and-out defense, we can focus on the tackling fundamentals and be aggressive secondary run support. So that's one of the keys for us, I think, in the base nickel, is being able to tackle from a secondary position near the line of scrimmage and prevent them from getting extra yards after contact. So when we start talking about tackling fundamentals, it's not just about tackling the guy to the ground. While that's important, it's also tackling a guy when you hit him, there's no gain after you hit him. And that's a whole nother technique and level of coaching when you're working on tackling. The old days we used to talk about tackling is just getting the guy to the ground. Well, you could hit the guy first contact and he carries you for 2 yards. Well, that's no good if you're meeting him 2 or 3 yards down the field or off the line of scrimmage, and that's a 5-yard gain. So it's important when you're tackling from the secondary, like you do a lot in the base nickel defense, is that when the guys come to the line of scrimmage, that when they hit a guy and make a tackle, that guy goes down. So that's an important facet of our philosophy. The other thing is spacing on the high school field. You don't have, at least I don't hear a lot of people talk about the spacing on the high school field, but 80 to 90% of the game is played within 3 yards of that hash. And so you're talking about a wide side of the field that's 35 yards and a short side of the field that's 18 yards. And so we take advantage of that. We are going to have a field overhang most of the time in our base defense, and we're going to use the short side of the field for boundary blitz. And those two things have been real effective for us in forcing teams. If you're going to run to the wide side of the field, you're going to run to the numbers. If you're going to go into the boundary, you're also going to deal with some boundary blitzes also to keep the offense off balance. So that's something you'll see throughout our package and how we set up our defense. You're going to see our structure in our defense is with a field overhang and a structure into the boundary where we can blitz. And then finally, the other big thing that you're going to see with our nickel-based defense is you're going to have a pre-snap structure that's very similar. The defense is not going to get a whole lot of cues on what we're doing, but we can do a lot of things out of our base look, and I'll be talking about that more in clinic number 2 when we show you what our assignments are and how we use that structure to create an advantage. We also use a 4-man front most of the time. This year we went to 2 stand-up edge people. We kind of did that out of necessity, but in years past we've had 4 down, and in some years we have 3 down with the stand-up. The 2 stand-ups for us have been hybrid-type linebackers, and that's been good for us in some of our defensive structures that we face too. With that being said, let's get into how we talk about our defensive structure and surface adjustments. So we feel like you have to have a plan for what you call formations. Maybe a lot of teams have this. We seem to have early on. We kind of went back and forth on what we were going to call things and how we were going to adjust those structures. We kind of fell into this as a base structure on what we're going to call formations, and it's been very good for us. It's really been the key. This kind of was the first thing, and then from there we were able to build our defense around attacking certain surfaces or formations. So one of the things that you look for in formation recognition is first thing for us is 1-back versus 2-back, and that way you know that if you're going to get a 2-back set, you know there could be another gap inside with that fullback. If you're going to get a 1-back set, you're probably going to have a good clean look as far as 6 gap with no attached tight end. Or if you have an attached tight end, then you're looking at 7 gaps. The one thing that we're seeing more now, and we'll talk about that, is the off tight end. The off tight end does play a role in gap exchange, and we'll talk some about that in Clinic 1 and 2. The other thing is attached receivers, like I said, the tight end, and if the tight end is going to be on or off the line, that's an important aspect now. 5 years ago, honestly, we never even thought about it. If the tight end was off the line or on the line, we treated it as the same surface, and we had to come up with a new word for an off tight end, even though he's in the same spot he would be as a regular tight end, but he's just a yard back. That is something that's been kind of a phenomenon the last 5 years, and offenses are taking advantage of being able to have the guy in the backfield. He's close enough to where he can block the edge and you give you a 3-pad surface, but he's also in the backfield so he can go to the backside of the play and create another gap on the backside. So we've had to adjust in the last few years and create some more terminology to deal with that. Obviously, detached receivers, whether you got a 3x1 or a 2x2 look, and even now we get a lot of quads looks, 4x1 type stuff. And the reason that we talk about formations and surfaces is these alignments can dictate the possible pass concepts to defend. There are certain areas of space that the offense will get into based on their alignment. And so as a defense, we have to use that to our advantage. Of course, the offense is going to try to hide some of these alignments, but if you can teach your kids kind of an auto check system, it's been real beneficial for us. We'll talk about how that works. Some of the benefits to being able for your players to recognize surface structures is it allows you to game plan for the strengths and weaknesses of certain formations. There's no doubt that formation or surface structures will dictate what teams can do and can't do. You're not going to see a whole lot of bootleg, although you can, but not usually, out of a surface without an attached tight end or without somebody to protect the backside of the quarterback. I gave an example here. If you're going to see a 2 tight end, 1 back set, that set should be an alert for your defense for some kind of bootleg component. And there are other structures like that our defense is aware of. In this particular surface, we need to be aware of a bootleg, or we need to be aware of an inside zone run, or whatever it is. The offensive structure or the offensive surface does dictate that. All right, our structure and the way we call formations, 90 to 95% of formations for us fall into 3 categories. You're going to have 2-back formations, and you can use 1-back or 2-back personnel for that. You can have 1-back formations that are 3x1, and they'll do 1-back or 2-back personnel on that, and 1-back formations that are 2x2, that are 1-back or 2-back personnel. Of those 2, in a nickel defense, the 1-back is not an issue. I mean, that's usually why you're in a nickel defense, to deal with the 1-back. The 2-back is the one where I hear the biggest concern by people is say, well, how can you stop a good 2-back pro-I team out of the nickel? And I'm going to talk to you about how we do that, particularly a lot of it in clinic too. Also, I want to mention here that there are some other categories that I'm not going to talk about, but you may see these. One is quads. We consider these to be exotics, 4x1 formation. You also will see 3-back sets, and I'm going to talk about how we stop 3-back sets in my third clinic, which is one with our short yardage sub-package. And then we also see unbalanced stuff too. We refer to unbalanced like nub sets, which is just a 2-pad side, and we have adjustments for that. So this clinic is not going to talk about the exotics. I'm going to talk about 90 to 95% of the formations that we see and how we call them and the structure of those. First, we're going to start with a 2-back set. And of course, the things to remember in a 2-back set is that you're going to have guard pulls where they're going to create new gaps. You also have to figure out if they're a 2-back set, usually they're going to have 2 wideouts. One of them could be a dominant wideout. So while your emphasis is being able to get an extra secondary guy to fit some of those extra gaps, if it's an attached tight end with a fullback in the backfield, you're talking about a possible 8 gaps. With a 6-man front, that means you're going to have to bring 2 secondary guys quickly on a run look, and we're going to talk about how we do that. Also, how to bring 8 guys and fit those gaps, and also deal with a dominant receiver. And then the other thing that you're going to see as you get your guys closer to the line of scrimmage and playing downhill to stop the run is what happens when the offense goes max protect and gives them plenty of time to go down the field. So those are all things you want to think about in a 2-back and how you structure it. And some of that will play into your blitz package, which I'm not going to get into today, but that's certainly a big part of it. All right, so in a two-back set, we basically go with three formations or surfaces that we call pro, slot, and twins. And that's been good for us. That gives us a good structure. First is the pro set, which is what everybody refers to as the two-back and a tight end with a flanker on one side and a split end on the other. That's pretty common. The one thing about in a pro set that you want to think about, like I mentioned, is just the attached tight end brings you 7. So as soon as you have an attached tight end versus a nickel defense, somebody in your secondary has to be aware or has to be coached to be able to help fit a gap. Also, because of the fullback in the backfield, they have a fitter that can go on either side, so that can give you up to 8 gaps. So if you're looking at 8 gaps, then you know you got 2 guys in your secondary that are going to have to fit inside the tight end. So for us, in a two-back set, that would be the rover and a free safety. And we call our coverages for that. So when our defense sees a two-back set, we know that we might have to fit 8 gaps. So we will have a coverage call accordingly. And I'll get into those coverage calls in clinic too, but I just want to go over what we call them and what we're thinking about on the surfaces. All right, the second formation that we see in two-back is when they take the 2 wide receivers and put them on the same side. We simply refer to that as twins. That's a pretty common formation. You have a tight number 1 on the back side there. You have some of the same issues that you had in pro. The only thing is now you have 2 quick receivers to one side that you have to deal with. You have a 7 gap with the tight end, and then you have a fullback that can create an 8 gap. So you still have to have 2 secondary people that can fit inside to play those 8 gaps. Because of the tight end is a tight number 1, we have a corner that has to be a run fitter. So you have to teach your corners early on that they have to be able to be run fitters. Now, you could make a switch call and have your rover and corner exchange positions, and so your corner would be back and play a pass first. We've been hesitant to do that. We did that some early on, but what we found is with teams that do a lot of motion and stuff, you end up getting your corner out of position or in a unique spot that he's not used to. So we ended up just teaching our corner how to be a physical presence against a tight number 1, and the rover is playing in his regular spot, so he can be a downhill read guy. Then the last one that we refer to in our generic two-back communication, we just call it a slot. Now this is going to be one without a tight end, so you're going to have 2 quick receivers on one side and a split end on the other. So now we're back to just 6 gaps with an additional gap coming from your fullback where he might have to fit. So you have the 2 quick receivers that you have to deal with to one side, so you're still going to have to get a fit out of your secondary, your rover, your free safety, and you have to make coverage calls accordingly on that. The big thing about in our 4-2 structure up front is our free and our rover end up having to be cutback players. And so that is a whole coaching process and coverage process also, because we, with just having the 2 linebackers in there, we want those guys to flow fast and to be protected by the secondary people. I have one additional one that we've added. This wasn't one of our base ones out of pro, slot, and twins. This one, we add a wing surface. And so basically for us, it's a pro wing look. And you'll see some of those clips, particularly in session 2 and session 3, how we deal with a wing surface. So for us, we have a basic call versus a wing surface and how we deal with it. But obviously, the wing surface adds a gap, and in reality can add 2 gaps. But what it takes away the offense's ability to get 2 verticals on you because of the spacing. So we take advantage of that. We're going to worry about 1 vertical, and we'll be able to use some jam techniques on that wing and preventing from getting off. And also we can do a quick fit out of the secondary with our free safety off of that wing surface. So while the wing surface creates more gaps, your players need to be aware of it, and you need to have a plan and understand, well, how are we going to fit those gaps? And what do they what do they lose when they go wing? Well, they lose the two vertical threats that you normally have. So there's no reason to have two deep guys when they're in a wing set. So that's what you see here in the configuration. You see our corner is back deep. He's going to be the pass first player, while the strong safety and the free safety are going to be they're going to be downhill read guys. Some people call them flat-footed reads. My DB coach likes to call them bounce reads. He doesn't like to use the term flat-footed, but either way, they are downhill reads. And in this case, our rover can also be a cutback player to help us. So the Mike and the Will can be fast flow guys. All right, I am going to talk about some backfield. If you're in a two-back set, they're not always in the eye, of course. So this is just some generic ways that we refer to two-back and how those backs move around. So for us, you can call it what you want, but what we've had in the past is if the fullback is aligned to the tight end, we just call that a king set. So as you add into what your formation call is, you're going to have a pro set with the fullback to the tight end as a king. And then so if the fullback is away from the tight end, obviously we just refer to that as queen. And we have different calls based on where that fullback is. If we go back and you look at the fullback is on that side, you're really getting into more of a 3-by-1 look. So we have 3-by-1 calls, and so we could get into those 3-by-1 calls. When the fullback goes to the other side, you're looking more and more like a 2-by-2 call. And depending on where he is, he almost could be all the way out to where a tight end set is, and it's basically ends up being a 2-by-2 set anyway. The other thing we call, if there's no tight end, what are you going to call him? Well, if he's in a two-back set, if he's to the two receiver side, we just call that a strong backfield. And if he's the opposite, if he's to the split inside, we just call that a weak backfield. And that's been good for us to be able to communicate backfield action. So you have a formation or a surface call, and then you have a backfield set. And certainly defensively, we know that the backfield set will dictate a lot of what they can do and can't do. The last backfield structure that we face a lot of times is just a typical split back. So that's really the structure that we see. You got king and queen if you have a tight end. We have strong and weak if you don't have a tight end. And then, of course, if the backs are just separated on either side, we just make a simple split call. And, as a defensive coordinator, you obviously, the surface structure with the backfield, particularly in a two-back, is going to help you dictate what you want to do formation-wise and how you want to defend them. All right, so here's a kind of a summary look at what we've talked about. In a two-back offense, without an unbalance now, is you really surface side, and we're going to talk about these surfaces in clinic too, as we start making our calls and what our assignments are. But so we're dealing with a pro surface for us is a tight end and a flanker. And that tight end can be on or off to us. It's still a pro surface. It still gives you a wide guy and an attached guy who creates a gap. The twin surface gives you the two quick on the one side, and then you have to deal with a tight number one. So that's where your corner play is involved. How are you going to deal with the corner and teaching him as a run fitter or even a fold player for us. And then finally, the wing surface is something that you have to have a plan for in dealing with the wing. We deal with a wing in two-back. We also have a wing surface that we'll talk about in 3-by-1. That is also something that you have to have a plan for. And then on the weak side surfaces in a two-back is pretty simple. You're either going to have a tight number one or you're going to have a wide number one. And so those are pretty easy. All right, let's get into, this is our formation recognition summary. So I'm going to talk about just kind of an overview of what we just talked about. You have a pro set. Everybody knows what a pro set is. Usually it's pretty uniform. It's one of the things in football that's pretty uniform, a pro set. A tight end and a flanker and a split end. And then some form of two-back in the backfield, whether it's I king, I queen, something like that. A pro wing set for us, this is what we refer to, and it can be different personnel. They could have a two tight end personnel. We would still refer to it as pro wing. where we have that flanker now comes in and he's right off the hip of the tight end. Then a slot for us, slot just means it's open. The O in slot is one of the things we use for our kids to remember. Hey, we're talking about a slot. Slot has an O in it. That means it's open. There is no tight end. And that's a way they can remember. Anytime we get some kind of two-back configuration with two quick receivers and a split end, we refer to that as a slot. And then finally, twins for us. Twins has got a T in it for a tight end, and we have two quick receivers and one attached receiver. And those are just our generic terms, and they have been really good for us in communication with our players and for our guys to be able to recognize. And we will, as we build out our defense, we will give our free safety and rover, who are our quarterbacks in our nickel defense, the authority to change the coverage based on the surface that they see. So we will make a base call, and from there, the rover will see whatever surface he gets, and he will make a coverage call. And then our free safety on his side will see his surface, and he'll make a coverage call that will impact how we defend it, and understanding what those surfaces take away and what advantage they create. Now we're going to get into some one-back sets. This is what the nickel is for. So you kind of feel like, all right, if I'm getting into one-back, I'm pretty comfortable with this. But we still needed to have a communication structure with our defensive players on how we're going to refer to some of these structures. So we'll go through here. For us, a 2x2 is a D family. So everything that is a 2x2 formation will start with a D. So we start with the most basic one, which is there is no tight end. It's just two quick receivers on either side. We call that doubles. And that kind of plays into our slot set. Doubles has an O in it, so that means everything's open. There is no attached tight end. And that's the first structure we deal with. In our double set here, one of the things, it's obvious there's only 6 run gaps, so you feel pretty good about defending a run in your 4-2. However, what you'll see on the screen here, you notice my will linebacker is moved over to the left a little bit. You have to have some kind of plan for how to deal with that. And for us, when you get into doubles with the 2 quick receivers, if you're not going to put everybody down low and play a cover 0, which we don't do unless it's in the red zone, then you have to figure out what space are you going to leave open. That's the important part of playing defense, is what space is going to be open. For us, we're going to leave the flat space and the intermediate space to the wide side of the field. There's not a lot of high school quarterbacks that can make that throw consistently and who are going to make that throw. So the 2 quick receivers to the field, we still defend it. We have the overhang, as you can see the strong safety there, but the least dangerous space for us is that space to the wide side of the field. The space into the boundary, you see our corner is up and is pressed. And when I get into clinic 2 and I talk about why we do that, the space there is a lot easier for a completion for a high school quarterback. So that space is a premium for the defense to defend. And that's why you see that will linebacker bumped over a little bit. So one thing about doubles to us, when our defense sees doubles, we know there has to be some kind of structure, alignment changed by our linebackers. And in this case, our will linebacker, we make a bump call. He's going to get out there to be able to handle that number 2 quick receiver into the boundary. All right, now we're going to talk about a 2x2 set that has an attached tight end. Again, this is D family. So when we use a D word, we know we're talking about a 2x2. The structure is different here. We use the word dual, and dual refers to a 2x2 structure with a tight end. It can be dual left, dual right, or sometimes we even refer to it as field dual versus boundary dual, because again, we're so much geared on where the alignment on the hash or not. So here you have the Y is aligned to the field in a dual set. Things that we think about now, they've created another gap. So there's 7 gaps for us. it's a pro surface to the right side here, or the field side. So that structure we've already went over in the 2x1 is how we're going to defend that, and I'll get into specifics of that in Clinic 2. But to us, that's just a pro surface on that side. Now, with the attached tight end, we know that we have to have somebody fit out of the secondary because we only have a 4-2 front, and so they have 7 gaps. So your free or your rover, or rovers are weak safety. The free or the rover has to be able to fit, if not one, both of them have to be able to play fit from the secondary position. The other 2x2 structure that we see some is this 2x2 set with both tight ends and then 2 wideouts. We refer to this as a deuce set. Again, the D family means it's a 2x2. So as we communicate with our players, and this is the building blocks for the defense, is we have to be able to communicate with the players, and they have to understand formation structures. So having the same letter for each one really helps them kind of conceptualize what we're talking about, a 2x2 set. In the deuce set, we have 2 tight ends. So we're looking at an 8-gap structure here. So now you definitely have to have 2 guys in the secondary that can fit or protect your Mike and Will as they flow. You also have to look at the structure of having outside secondary support guys. So into the boundary, it can be problematic dealing with a deuce set. So that's why with the tight corner into the boundary, every once in a while you have to keep the offense honest and probably bring a corner blitz just so they know they're not going to be able to run your corner off every time and then run into a soft secondary support guy coming from the rover or even the will linebacker. The next 2x2 set is kind of a new one for us. We didn't refer to this. We didn't talk about this years ago. We just considered this to be dual, which dual for us is an attached tight end and a pro side or pro surface and 2 quick receivers. So what we saw a lot of now is it's a dual set, but that Y is off all the time. And with him being off, really it creates a different type of look, certainly different thought process defensively because that guy can go on either side. So we've kind of added this one. We call it duo. So the O is the tight end is off, or the Y is off there. And so you see, again, there's really not a big difference from dual and duo. And again, we went several years and we just said, oh, we'll just call it dual or dual off or whatever. But we started seeing this so much that we said, let's just come up with another word, another D word to refer to if we have an off tight end. So our kids can know in dual and duo, really it's different surfaces. So we needed to do that because in dual, you're not going to have that tight end go on that back side a whole lot. It's very difficult for him. But in duo, we certainly see that, especially like with a split zone concept where that Y can go on that back side and kick out that end and create another gap on that backside that we have to deal with. So we did add the duo wording. And so again, it's 7 gaps because they have an attached tight end. So now you're talking about, all right, I got to have secondary support, rover or free. You have to call coverages, and your rover and free have to be downhill players if you're expecting a run or if it's a 50-50 first down deal and you're going to play run first. We're going to treat the Y like a tight end, but we also understand that he can fit on that back side. So the rover and the free have to have a plan for that. All right, we're going to finish with 1-back sets in our 3x1. Again, in a 1-back set, in a nickel defense, we should be in our comfort zone. This is what the nickel was built for, so this is kind of in our wheelhouse. We continue with naming formations and naming surfaces using a letter in the alphabet. So for 3x1s, we use all T family. So these are all T words. So anytime we're dealing with a 3x1 and my free safety's coming over and we're talking the language of what are our coverage adjustments versus our T family or 3x1s. And it's very important. And if you're a nickel defense and you're a split coverage guy and you're trying to get the best run support based on surface area and the best pass support as far as taking away their best concepts or their best receivers, you need to have a communication structure, and your players need to be able to communicate to you so you can make those adjustments. So the first one we start out with is the most common one, no tight end. So we have an O again, just like we talked about slot is open, and we talked about in doubles is open, and in a 3x1 trio is open. So it's a basic 3x1 set for us. And again, the nickel defense is built for this. So we're in our comfort zone now in this 3x1. What are we thinking about? Well, we're thinking about there's only 6 gaps, and we're in a 4-2 look, so we ought to be in pretty good shape. The only other thing is there's 4 vertical threats now. But again, if you're in a nickel defense, you ought to be able to defend 4 verticals. There's different ways to defend it. I'll talk about that more in Clinic 2, the different ways we defend this. But certainly that's our thought process on trio. And then another formation out of the T family is our trip set. Trips gives us a tight number 1 on the backside and 3 detached to the field. So we have the same surface structures that we deal with in twins. So your corner is dealing with a tight number 1. So you can use your tight number 1 rules on the back side. You should have tight number 1 rules whether it's a 2-back or a 1-back here. So in this case, you have to make a determination whether your corner is going to be on an island back there dealing with the Y, or if he's going to have some kind of support. So you have your tight number 1 rules on the back side. Then another 3x1 popular formation is the tray set, which is pretty common terminology now. I'm hearing a lot of people refer to this. This has been good, kind of like pro set. Tray seems to be pretty common, which is a tight end trip set, I guess, is one way to look at it. You have a tight end to the side of the 2 quick receivers. So dealing with tray, it's a very popular formation. We use it a lot on our offense, and really puts a lot of 3-4 teams in a bind a little bit. Some of the things to think about in tray is you add an extra gap, but you also add 2 quick receivers to the field. So now you're dealing with, we got to have a 7-man gap, we got to deal with 4 verticals, and we got to deal with 2 quick receivers to the field. So there's a lot going on here with the tray set if they have a really good tight end who can block. One of the things I mentioned earlier in the video was where are you going to give up open space? And you see here, we're going to give up that open space to the wide side of the field. We're going to make them complete short passes to the wide side of the field. The ball's going to be in the air a long time, and before we're going to adjust to that. Because we want to stop the run, we want to stop 4 verticals, but we're not ready to just let them dictate where the space is going to be open. They have to show us that they can attack that space. So you can see, for us, the open space is the low percentage area that they can throw to, or the longest throw possible. Again, into the boundary, you can see the space in the boundary is closed, the short space in the boundary is closed with our corner, and we'll talk about that some on why we do that in the next video. All right, and then finally, the last in our 3x1 sets. Again, this was something we just added, just like we did with duo, is we used to just treat it like tray. So they would have a tight end, he would be in the backfield, and they would have the 2 quick receivers, and for us that was tray. But what we're seeing now is they're doing this so much, and there's some different things that they do. There's a reason they're putting that Y in the backfield. We had to come up with another word for it for communication standpoint, because we kept saying tray, Y off, tray, Y off. Just come up with another word. So we came up with the word trot, and so he's off the tackle, I guess, is one way we refer to it, trot. So it's tray with an off Y, or an off tight end, I guess, if you want. So this formation for us is something we're seeing more and more of. So communication-wise, our players have to recognize what this entails. Of course, you have all of the same principles of Trey. You have the 4 vertical threat, you have the 7 gaps, you have the 2 quick receivers to the side, but you also have now a moving gap with the Y in the backfield. He can now go to the back side, he can go to the front side, wherever, and that's an important piece of the puzzle. So we needed to have a way to refer to that as something different than Trey. Of course, just like we talked about in the nickel defense, anytime you got 7 gaps, somebody in your secondary needs to have a call or responsibility to help fit inside. And in this case, either the rover or the free safety is going to have to fit inside because we're dealing with 7 gaps. Depending on where that Y goes will determine where they might have to fit on that. Okay, just to review now where we are on our surface summary. So we're dealing with the pro surface that we saw in 2-back. We also see it in dual sets, induced sets in our 2x2, dual and deuce being our 2x2 D words. Our twin surface, which is our 2 detached, we obviously see that in a 2x1, in a twins, what we call twins itself. We also see it in a 2x2. In doubles, we got 2 detached on either side, or a twin surface on either side, if you will. In dual, we have 1 twin surface, and in duo, we have 1 twin surface. A wing surface, we can see a wing surface in the pro set where they bring that guy in, and you can also see one in a 3x1 in Trey. If they want to get rid of the 2 quick receivers, they could bring a guy in for a wing surface there also. Now, when you get into 1-back stuff, you're going to get into 3 detached. So we have 3 detached with a tight number 1 on the backside. We have 3 detached with a wide number 1 on the backside. And then the unique surface of Trey, or trot, if you will, you'll have the 2 detached plus a tight end, and the tight end could be off or the tight end could be on. When we go weak side surface, you're only really dealing with a few here. Obviously, we had the wide number 1, the tight number 1. We saw both of those in 2-back, and we see some of that in the 3 receiver sets. In trips or trio or even Trey, we had the wide number 1. Then you're going to look at twins weak, which is just 2 detached, which we can see that in the 2-back, and we see that in the 2x2 sets in our D family. And then we have a pro on the weak side, which we can see that in our 2x2 set where we're in deuce or dual, we can have a pro set. All right, here is just a kind of a summary page for you of our D family and our T family. And I tell you, this has really helped us teaching the kids, spending time teaching the defense to be able to identify. Again, we do a lot of coverage checks. And I'm going to get into clinic too. I'm going to talk about our checks on coverage and our assignments and how we do this. But there's a lot of coverage checks. And you can't get into coverage checks if your players can't communicate the language of what they're seeing. And they can't tell you that the offense is in a Trey set or the offense is in trio, then I don't think you can do all the things that you need to do from our standpoint in a nickel defense to be effective. And to be able to get secondary players stopping the run, you need to be able to call coverages accordingly. So your players need to be able to communicate what they're seeing, and you need to be able to make in-game adjustments as needed if we're getting certain looks out of the formations that we didn't see on film. All right, this will complete episode 1. Again, this is a communication episode. We wanted to give you what our communication is here, how we communicate with the players before we get into how we actually do our split coverage assignments and how we deal with multiple formations. Remember, what the goal is in a nickel defense is we're able to defend space, but we're also able to defend run gaps from the secondary. And to do that, you have to have a plan for whatever surface you see, and your players need to be able to adjust accordingly. There's some technique involved in being able to play run gaps from an off position or from 8 to 10 yards, and I'll talk about that more in episode 2. Thank you.